go over is something that we're not going to be rolling out all at once, but this is kind of a process of trying to streamline our premature infant care and standardize it, as Allison was emphasizing in her presentation earlier. This is the first time RTs have seen this list. Charge nurses have seen this list. All the charges have seen this list, and all the docs have seen this list. This will be the first time that RTs and ALS have seen this list, but it's a checklist that is designed to streamline our workflow in the perinatal period and really kind of optimize things. And it's the first piece of that we're emphasizing is the bubble CPAP and you know the idea of trying to keep our PEEP and not lose our FRC. So the first bit is really this is a pre-admission checklist or a pre-delivery checklist. And we don't, you know, as you just commented earlier, you know, talking about precipitous deliveries, this is an ideal situation where you have a unit that has the capacity to sit down and do a pre-brief. It's a baby that you're expecting but hasn't delivered. And that's when you'd be able to do something like a pre-admission huddle where you get your docs, charge nurse, the nurses that are going to go to delivery, the RT and the ALS nurse, if they're available, to all come together and review the maternal data and the infant data that's available to you, review the admission plan, and this is where you'd review whether or not a baby would be eligible for bubble CPAP. Assign roles to the nursing and delivery team. So whether that's your two neos, the ALS nurse, the RN, who's going to be doing what down in the delivery room, and whether this will be a time to discuss whether or not an RT feels like they would be even available to come down. So this would be the time to do all that if we have the availability to do so. The next piece is checking the emergency equipment. This is something that RTs and ALS nurses already routinely do. So this is not a change in workflow, but just another thing to check a box and say, hey, make sure we're doing this. The last bit is the RT setup. Again, this is something you already do, but setting up the vent or CPAP as per what we talk about in the pre-admit huddle, and remembering that CPAP is the first line of support if this is a baby that seems appropriate for. If you've heard that, you know, okay, this is a kid that, you know, it's a premature baby who has a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, or it's a premature baby who has a bowel obstruction, and you know that baby's going to come up on intubated, it may be a kid that you can go ahead and start getting surfactant ready for. Think about a dose, pulling the vial, maybe having it warm up. So this is the golden hour checklist after the baby's born. And here I'm really emphasizing that this is back in the unit. So ALS nurse, you know, you're probably still around at this point, but we don't have any tasks specifically assigned to you guys. So I've highlighted the areas that really emphasize the RT change in workflow. The first bit where we'll actually have RTs participating is moving the infant. You guys do this already, but with the CPAP circuit from the panda to the giraffe. And Amu in that video that we watched actually was kind of playing the role of the RT. So that would be the RT role, moving the humidifier, disconnecting the oxygen tubing and reconnecting the oxygen tubing as promptly as can, and then setting up your humidification system. At that point, we would have the team call for an X-ray if the baby's intubated. And we're going to try, if babies are intubated, to do X-rays earlier, which is a change in workflow. So that's the next step here. Get the X-ray stat. It doesn't mean don't set up for lines. It doesn't mean delay doing lines. Go ahead and get that rolling. But go ahead and get the X-ray, particularly if a baby's on greater than 35% FiO2. That way we have prompt delivery of surfactant. Does this mean we're going to be doing multiple X-rays in some cases? Probably. A lot of times during the day when it's a little bit busier, or at night when there's more going on in the hospital and there's fewer X-ray techs, sometimes it can take a while to get an X-ray tech there. And you may actually call for the X-ray when the baby comes back, and maybe, you know, it only takes you 30 minutes to place your lines. And by the time the X-ray tech's there, you've actually got your lines in. That would be the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you'd get 2 X-rays. But the admission of surfactant early is something we hope can help reduce our BPD. And then again, this is just emphasizing on administering the surfactant early. So these steps, X-ray and early administration of surfactant before line placement, in situations where you have a significant FiO2 requirement. That's a change in RT workflow. The next bit, so I just want to emphasize this. So every 15 minutes as we're going through this, assuming we have a nurse who is doing just exclusive charting, which we won't always have, but if we have a nurse who is able to just chart and go through the checklist as we're admitting one of these babies who's eligible for this, which again is less than 30 weeks, then hopefully every 15 minutes, they'll be saying baby is X minutes old and has been in the NICU for Y minutes. The golden hour, if you will, we're going to start from the time the baby's admitted to the NICU as opposed to the time of birth. The next piece where you have RT involvement is hopefully roughly the 30 to 45 minute mark. At this point, we should have already had lines placed or access in an ideal situation. And at that point, we should be obtaining a blood gas and glucose. And I will bring up that at every one of these check marks where where the charting nurse is saying baby is X minutes old, has been in the NICU for Y minutes, we should be assessing respiratory status and need for intubation. So that's another thing that should be on RT's window, is that every 15 minutes while we're going through this, if you have someone who's charting, that's really, you've got an extra set of eyes, extra set of ears, someone who can bring up ideas like that. Hey, should we be intubating this baby? Doesn't mean you should do it, but it's at least a thought and a period to think about it. The next bit is at the 45 to 60 minute mark, and that's just verifying that the endotracheal tube is in good position, and that'll be on an X-ray. Hopefully at this point at 45 to 60 minutes, we've already administered our surfactant if we need it, and it's indicated, but you'll have been doing lines and you'll get another X-ray, and we should be capturing the endotracheal tube on both those films. And that's another point where we need to verify that the tube's in good position and adjust if we need to. Administering surfactant at this point, if you haven't yet, or if you intubated after NICU admission, and that would be at the 45 to 60 minute mark. The 60 minute, and then if we have trouble getting lines, at this point, we'd really be thinking about doing a cap gas to get a glucose if we haven't gotten an arterial line or a UVC that you can draw off of. So that's again another step that's like, okay, this is just an extra layer. If you haven't gotten access by 60 minutes, hopefully that charting nurse or someone is saying at this point, hey, it's 60 minutes. You know, should we just get a PIV and get a cap gas and get some glucose going to this baby and check our respiratory status? And that concludes kind of the early part of the golden hour, or the first hour in the NICU. You know, the rest of it is an emphasis, like we said early on keeping the PEEP and some of the extended neuroprotective measures we're making. And really keeping the PEEP can be thought about as an extended neuroprotective measure. It's something that you're going to be messing with the baby less. And potentially maybe not intubating some babies if we're able to maintain FRC. This is the post golden hour checklist. So this is after that first, 60 to 75 minutes. Here we'll be replacing the CPAP hat if it's soiled. Ideally, like we did down in the delivery room, you're holding the bubble CPAP device on the baby's face as you're pulling the hat off and putting the new one on. That's going to take 2 sets of hands. You're not going to be able to do that as a solo, but you should have 1 to 2 bedside RNs there who can assist with that in terms of holding the mask while you're replacing the hat if it's soiled. Went backwards, sorry. Clicked up instead of down. The next one is considering a team debrief. This is this last one here. And if we're doing a debrief, this is really to cover all bits of the admission, from delivery management all the way up to administration of surfactant and kind of closing of the golden hour. That's if we have ALS availability, RT availability, charge nurse, and the nurses who are down in the delivery, as well as the docs, we should really come together at that point and just go through what we thought went well. Even if there isn't anything to improve on, say, hey, this went really well. Or if you did something different that made things go well, it's really important to note that. That way it's something hopefully we can standardize and implement in our care moving forward. Or if there were issues, things that could have gone better, things that contributed to the issues during that. And That's all we've got for the RT changes in workflow. So really the points of emphasis are early administration of surfactant for the RTs. And for the ALS nurses, it's the bubble CPAP itself and also getting a MRSA swab down in the delivery room. I know that's a big change in workflow for ALS nurses. That's most of what I've got. Do you have any questions? Got both Allison and I here now.
And I just wanted to acknowledge Amu, Spencer, Megan, and Jeff, who have worked really hard to create this small baby simulation, which is leading to us being able to implement these checklists and implement bubble CPAP. And also thank you to everybody who is listening and is ready to take the next step. And the next step will be that the ALS nurses will get signed off. There'll be setups in room 19, I think. Megan will help do those sign-offs for you. Seeing it on the screen is one thing, it's actually doing, right? That's how we learn. So you'll have time to play with it. But questions from those of you who are here. And I also wanted to make sure that I captured everybody. I think we've got Tina, Debbie, Susie, Tony, Nicole, Jessica, and Megan, and Jamie. Did I miss anyone? And Edwina, of course. Did I miss anyone else? No. So questions, comments?
Thank you for doing this. This was great.
Good. Well, thank you guys. And yeah, make sure you go and play with it, because really, like I said, it's the playing with it and the handling of it that really helps you feel more confident in using it. And also, I think last time you emphasized, one of the questions was, well, what if we have 3 babies at once that
yes.
need it, right?
Yes.
The setup, there will be 3 setups in the cart, which are going to live in L&D. But as I think, Nicole, you said before, if you're by yourself and all hell's breaking loose, it may be that you have to determine which baby is going to get the bubble CPAP. And maybe you might just need to use the old fashioned way, which is you're going to transfer that baby holding the mask in place, and we do the bubble CPAP upstairs. So don't feel like this is critical that you do it on every single baby. If it's not realistic and it's not feasible, then you won't do it. But that's our goal.
Still, yes, still very important to use your triage skills and try and assess which babies it makes sense for and which babies it makes sense for your resources and time to go towards doing it. Particularly early on, when I think it'll probably take us a little bit longer, there'll be a little bit more troubleshooting. As we all get more experience in applying it, I think it'll probably go more smoothly. And again, that's why we hopefully can get some RTs down there early on. Hopefully the unit isn't exploding quite as badly as it is right now. But we will, as Allison said, we will have 3 in the cart. The cart will be in L&D. We haven't picked a spot yet. But if you have a baby you think is going to be eligible for it, you can bring the cart outside the room or bring it into the room where the baby's going to be delivered. If it's twins, you have set up for 2. If you have 3 babies being born at once, well, you can only have 1 cart. So you've got to decide which one you want to take the cart to. And unfortunately, if that kiddo ends up getting intubated, well, that's the breaks. But this is really, an effort to start it. And it's something that I'm sure we're going to be refining as we go forward.
Yep. It will evolve, and it will evolve with your input, because you're the ones that will be performing this. And that's where, just as we learned with every simulation, we learned something different and added something or took something away from the checklist, and really just refined some of the details. So this will come with time. But thank you, everyone.
A question, restocking the cart. Is this the supplies are going to be found in the RT closet, which don't know the location.
So that little piece we're working on. So that once we finalize that, as we said, we're only going to have 3 setups. So
Right.
one thought, just a random thought that hasn't been finalized, is as the baby's coming up, you will take that circuit from the RT room to replace it downstairs, because it would have been a circuit that the RT would have used anyway. So
Oh, okay.
it's
The supplies
substitute-
are the same then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially exactly the same. The only difference is we aren't going to use some of the larger sizes.
Yeah.
And we aren't going to use the pole.
Yeah.
The pole with the humidifying heating element. That's not going to be used downstairs. That's just going to be used upstairs. So everything else is exactly the same.
Yeah. So we just.
So we'll be doing the charging then of the equipment and stuff
Yeah.
like we normally would be doing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Great questions. Anything else? All right, guys, it's 10:35. We'll give you the rest of your day to go and do whatever it is you'd like to do.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye, have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.